Hi there, Regeneration Church. My name is Elliot. I'm a pastor at Gracepoint Presbyterian Church in Sydney. On the side, I serve as an adjunct lecturer at Christ College, teaching in the field of church history. And I'm also in the process of writing a PhD on St. Augustine of Hippo. Welcome to 3-Minute Theology. Over the next 3 to 5 minutes, I'm going to tell you 3 things about Augustine that will hopefully cause you to pick up one of his books or at least Google him after this video. Firstly, you are actually more influenced by Augustine than you realize. We often think of Augustine as a pastor theologian, and that's absolutely right. But Augustine's impact is felt in more disciplines and in more fields than we realize. So it doesn't matter if it's in the field of philosophy, politics, ethics, or even psychology. Most scholars in these fields drink from the rich well of Augustine. Let me give you an example that you probably do not expect. If you believe in the concept of critical thinking in learning, then you are actually building on an Augustinian tradition of education. You see, Augustine articulated a concept of the self, the human individual, that was able to reason, learn, expand, grow, contribute, integrate. And all of these provided the foundation for robust education. This may sound like a given to us, but it was actually revolutionary. And so it is a very little surprise that a lot of the medieval schools and universities were founded by leaders influenced by Augustinian thought. And we continue to reap the benefits of this today. So if you spend any amount of time discovering more of Augustine, you may realize that he has had a hand on whatever field you're studying or working in right now. His influence is absolutely incredible. Secondly, if you love Reformed theology, then you have to look at the figure who many of the great reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin turned to. You see, based on a deep study and meditation of Scripture, Augustine wrote a piece called Grace and Free Will. And in this, he speaks about issues like original sin, expanding on the idea of how all in Adam have fallen and are thus deserving of condemnation. Augustine writes about God's divine initiative, God's divine enablement in salvation. None of us have any inherent desire to reach out to God, but God in His kindness has reached out to us. And Augustine beautifully articulates how the gospel shows us to be more sinful and broken than we imagine. Yet by God's grace, we are more loved and cherished than we can ever hope for. The doctrine of sin and grace is something that was obscured for hundreds of years in the history of the church, but subsequently recovered during the period of the Reformation. How did that happen? The Reformers had the Bible in one hand, but also the early church fathers on the other hand, as they labored to restore the church to its original roots of faithfulness and orthodoxy. And Augustine was one of the main figures whose voice was re-amplified so that the gospel can be shown to be as beautiful as it is. Thirdly, Augustine deals with the reality of sin and sanctification in the Christian's life. One of Augustine's most well-known works is called The Confessions, and in it, he details not only how he came to faith in Jesus Christ, but he's also very transparent about how he wrestles with sin, and this is so helpful for us. Because while Christ has freed us from the penalty and power of sin through His work on the cross, we recognize that sin still has an effect on believers. And if you're like me, you've tried everything from self-discipline, self-control, stronger willpower to overcome sin. Maybe you've tried to be more rigorous in your devotion, in Bible reading, prayer, and communion with fellow believers. You're trying to fill your mind with more things about what it means to follow Jesus. And if you've done all that, then you know it is actually very helpful. Yet at the same time, you know it is also very limited. You see, Augustine shows that sanctification, fighting sin, growing in godliness, is about actually growing to love the right things. So as you open Augustine's work, what you discover is that he teaches and expounds the Scripture not only to deepen what we know about God. Significantly, he writes, preaches, and teaches to help us to grow in a greater love for God, to fall in love with God over and over again as a response to God's initiation and love for us. How does he do it so well? Well, you have to pick up one of his books to find out more. I recommend starting with The Confessions. You can buy this for a very affordable price in most bookstores. It doesn't even have to be a Christian bookstore. And I'm sure if enough of you are interested, Pastor Stephen will love to run a reading group where all of you can get together to read, to discuss, and see what Augustine means to live in freedom by faith every single day. I hope you enjoy.